Tucked into the Newfoundland coast is a beautiful enigma, Terra National Park. It's a rugged boreal forest pierced by a national highway. Here, the fingers of the Atlantic Ocean caress peaceful fjords. It's a place where seemingly obvious truths prove false, where early attempts at preserving this pristine forest actually damaged it.
If I was going to compare the forest to a patient, I would say that the patient is probably sick.
Where a beloved herbivore has become a threat.
The moose population numbers went really high, and it had a devastating effect on our balsam fir forest.
Where the seemingly empty bay actually teems with life. In this place, if you look close enough, nothing is as it seems. Years ago, a massive ice shelf began its retreat from coastal Newfoundland. As it left, mountains of ice carved homes for inland streams. And coastal fjords. It created valleys and rolling hills. Everything was in place for the creation of a spectacular forest. In 1957, the federal government claimed this paradise as Newfoundland's first national park. Its 400 square kilometers have been woven into the fabric of East Coast life.
We have about 85,000 visitors each year. Our visitation is very much from Newfoundland, and 80% actually is from the Avalon area of the province, which is St. John's and the surrounding communities. We have visitors who come here year after year. They leave their homes in June when school closes, and they come here straight through till September.
But even the people who camp out summer after summer and come back to enjoy the trails in the winter are missing some of the most compelling stories in Terra Nova.
Most people that come to Terra Nova don't see these rugged headlands. They're used to more of the sheltered coves and the calmness of the boreal forest. And really we're sitting on the edge of another vast wilderness, which is the North Atlantic. So waves are crashing in here and pounding the headlands again and again, and really shape some beautiful landscapes in this part of the park.
Dave Cote is an ecologist at the park. He researches one of the most elusive and notorious residents of Terra Nova, the otter.
One of the problems we have trying to study otters is they're so secretive. Very rarely do we ever get the chance to see an otter in a speedboat. They hear the engines coming, and most of the evidence that we have of their being here is basically what we find at these latrine sites. They're really hard to get footage of. And what we do is we set up some remote camera systems on shore that will trigger automatically when an otter comes into a latrine site.
River otters come to the latrine sites to groom themselves and clean the salt water from their fur. That allows pockets of air to form in their fur and keeps them from getting too cold. And yes, they come to the latrine site for the obvious reason. By studying their deposits, Cote is able to address one of the most damaging accusations against the otters.
Most people think that otters have a negative effect on fish and fisheries because they eat them.
No topic is more sensitive to Newfoundlanders than the plight of fish. And in this province, when you say fish, you mean cod. The once mighty cod fishing industry was shut down in 1992, putting tens of thousands of people out of work, shaking the mindset of the province to its core. However, in this part of Terra Nova, cod are actually starting to make a comeback. And the role river otters play in this comeback is surprising. That's why the evidence Dave Cote has found inside their feces is so important.
The scat is a scat here full of fish bones. You can see that's the dominant prey item for otters. I think about 70 to 80% of their food is usually fish. And in this we have a whole bunch of bones, including scales, like this one here. And the scales can be used for identifying how old the fish is and what species it is. But what we're looking for mostly are little bones like this otolith here, which is an ear bone in the fish. And so when we take these scats back to the lab, we wash them out, and then we sand these down and read them like tree rings, and we can identify the species, the size of the fish, and the age of it.
They found that otters do eat cod. In fact, they eat all kinds of fish. They'll eat the biggest fish they can catch. That's good news because the big fish eat young cod. But those big fish are being scared off by the otters. By keeping the bigger fish from the shallows, the otters are actually protecting an extremely important cod nursery.
The area behind us that we're working in, we've been here for quite a while, about 15 years now. It's the best studied cod nursery area in the country and in the world, actually. And why it's a unique cod nursery area is mainly because of the presence of eelgrass in the largest amounts of eelgrass in the nearshore habitat here. Not only does it supply food supply itself because it's a vascular plant, but it's also a structural feature of the seabed. So as a result of that, we have a lot of protection from predators. Eelgrass tends to exclude the older and larger fish from getting in. So basically it's like a small fish going through a wire fence to escape from something else. What we find is the juvenile cod in this particular habitat are 17,000 times more likely to survive in eelgrass as they are in very adjacent non-eelgrass type habitats.
That makes this the perfect place for young cod to grow. It also makes the perfect laboratory for studying a recovering species. One of the best ways to do this is through a process called beach seining.
It actually doesn't catch fish at all. The way the beach seine functions is as a herding device. You pull both ends of the seine in, the fish are staying in front of the net trying to get away from this wall coming at them. They actually don't realize that they're in trouble until the seine is pretty close to the beach. And then they try to get back out and they go right into the bag of the seine. What we will often see is anywhere between a couple of dozen fish and as many as 1,500 fish. And it depends on the year, it depends on the time of year, it depends on which year we're dealing with, how well the fish are doing this year. And that's one of the functions of why we're doing it, because it's so variable between years. This is one of these age 0 or young of the year cod. So this was an egg in April or May, and now is several months old. We're now 5 months old. He's typical of the Atlantic cod we get. Very orangey brown in appearance. I better put him back, he's getting annoyed at me. What we will do now that we've hauled in this net is we will count what we've caught, identify the species, measure individuals, and we will use that to determine the growth through the season and survival of recruitment pulses of individual cods.
The information gathered here gets a lot of attention. The government and the people of Newfoundland are anxious to learn when the cod stock will recover.
What we're doing here more than anything is we're determining when we expect to see them from the juvenile stage to the adult stage. What we have to do and position ourselves for in our research is to detect the signals of when that's going to occur.
It's a long waiting process, but thanks to the work being done in Terra Nova, at least the conditions needed to recover are being identified. Factors that include an animal once thought to be the problem. It's just one more instance of a problem actually being a solution. Unfortunately, many people only see Terra Nova National Park in Newfoundland from the window of their vehicle. If they pulled off the Trans-Canada Highway that bisects the park and looked around, they would find a forest dominated by black spruce and balsam fir. When the park was formed in 1957, protecting this forest was the primary goal.
Protection meant keeping exactly the same. So designate the area, let's not let anything happen to it because we want it to stay exactly the same.
That turned out to be a big mistake.
If I was going to compare the forest to a patient, I would say that the patient is probably sick. It needs some attention really soon. If not, the condition of the patient or the forest is going to deteriorate.
That's because this patient has been deprived of a bitter medicine: fire.
In the past, park management throughout Canada, we did fire suppression. And as a result of doing such a great job with fire suppression, the bulk of the forest in this very old age class that's greater than 100 years old is starting to break up and fall down.
The tree suffering the most is the black spruce. Although it seems counterintuitive, this tree needs the destruction caused by fires to survive.
Black spruce is a tree that has semi-serotinous cones, and it basically needs fire to help open up the cones and spread the seed out. And as a result, the fire gets rid of the ground vegetation and organic matter, and it produces suitable seed beds.
The problem has gone on so long that the undergrowth has been overrun by shrubs that lock up the nutrients in the soil, preventing regeneration. That's why park managers have decided to do something that at first may seem a little odd. They decided to start the fires themselves.
We're kind of early into our program, but we're moving forward and we're learning as we go, and hopefully we can improve the health of the black spruce forest by creating some young and rejuvenating black spruce forest through our prescribed burning program.
However, even if the prescribed burns work, they're only solving half the problem. That's because the balsam fir, the other dominant tree in the forest, is in danger. And you may be surprised to learn the identity of its mortal enemy. With a large nose, huge antlers, and skinny legs, moose are often thought of as cute. Perhaps, but mostly they are big and hungry. That turned out to be a very bad thing when in the natural course of the forest, the older, taller balsam fir trees started to come down.
They put a lot of sunlight in, and all these young balsam fir trees started to grow. And basically what this resulted in was huge cafeterias, if you want to look at it that way, as for a moose to actually just walk in and feed.
When that happened, the moose population exploded, and the balsam fir paid the price. As a result, it was grazed over and over. This meant trees decades old never get a chance to grow.
They're basically short and stubby, and we call them candlestick fir. Some of the fir trees you see here could be anywhere between 20 and 60 years old. So each year we get a good lusher growth. Looks like things are going to be okay again. But during the winter, when things get tough for moose and food get low, they turn their attention back to balsam fir, and this is some of the results you get.
So in the mid-1990s, the park built exclosures, fenced off areas to keep the moose out. Over time, researchers could compare the growth inside the exclosure to the growth outside. This would tell them exactly how much damage is being done by moose. The results speak for themselves.
Once you go to these exclosures, it's almost like a day and night type of thing. Inside the exclosure, it's a very lush vegetation of hardwoods and Boston fir, and when you go look outside the exclosure, it's almost like a moonscape. So if we didn't have any moose at all in Terra Nova National Park, this is what you should see.
So why is this just becoming a problem now? Because moose are relatively new residents here. They were introduced in the early 1900s, just about the time their natural predators, the wolves, were driven out. So with plenty of food and nothing to slow growth, the moose have free rein in the park.
All of our groups and our stakeholders and our partners agree and they say to us, Parks Canada, you do have a problem with moose. As a result, we're looking at ways to decrease the effects of moose.
However, messing with any species here is delicate because there are so few types of animals here to begin with.
Food web that exists here is all that much more fragile and easily interrupted. So the difficulty we have is that when anything happens to put that food web and that chain out of whack, it has all the more impact on everything else.
Great lengths are being taken to protect any native species. That's why John Goss is setting this trap. He's trying to catch a Newfoundland marten, a rare species unique to the region.
The Newfoundland marten is a distinct subspecies of marten. It's found nowhere else in the world. This particular subspecies only occurs on the island. And also it's one of our native species, and we only have 13 or 14 native species on the island.
The population started to decline in the early part of the 20th century because of trapping. They disappeared in the late 1950s and early 1960s.
Perhaps combined impacts of habitat loss from industrial forest operations and also from accidental snaring and trapping in traps intended to catch other fur bearers.
In the early 1980s, the Newfoundland marten was reintroduced with limited success. Another reintroduction was attempted in the 1990s.
Since 1996, we've had an ongoing and annual monitoring program. So we go out and live capture marten each and every fall and winter to get a better understanding of where the animals occur and how many are out there. We cover the trapping with moss and birch bark, and that'll keep the animal dry and warm inside the trap, and also keeps it feeling secure, not threatened.
Their study shows the reintroduction is starting to work.
Population has gone from fewer than 5 animals in 1996 to probably 35 or 40 in the area now. So it's still definitely a vulnerable population.
The park credits the success to better forest harvest management, less trapping, and a plentiful food source of southern red-backed voles for the marten. The management at Terra Nova National Park has many challenges: restoring the forest, juggling overpopulation of some species and underpopulation of others, but they feel they are headed in the right direction.
Hopefully, the prognosis of our forest patient is that delta is going to increase in the next 5 or 10 years and hopefully be maintained.
The prosperity on land will be easy to see. On the water, you'll need to look much, much closer. This is Terra Nova National Park in Newfoundland, where rugged mountains tail off into the Atlantic Ocean. It is 400 square kilometers of contradiction, where the obvious never seems to hold true. You'd think a coastal habitat would have drawn early settlers for the fishing, but that wasn't always the case.
This is Mentions Cove, and it's the oldest Euro-Newfoundland settlement in the park. Dates back to around 1890. The first couple of gentlemen that came here came from Gambo. Actually, they set up the first mill here. That mill was basically set up to cut the railway ties for the railway that was going through Newfoundland at the time. And they ran that mill here till about 1920, actually. And they moved away, and we can't find hardly any artifacts from that period of occupancy when they were here on that first time.
There is evidence that Aboriginal people were here as far back as 5,000 years ago, and artifacts suggest they were here for the bountiful seafood. To really see how abundant that life is, you have to get out on the water.
Well, we just left the visitor center, and here it is in October, and a lot of people might think there's not much to see in Terra Nova Park, but that's not true. What we're going to do is we're going to use our plankton net, and we're going to take it out, and we'll do a horizontal tow just under the surface, because there's been some, lately there's been a bloom of what are called copepods, which are little planktonic animals called zooplankton. And a lot of the smaller fish feed on them, as well as species like capelin and mackerel and herring. Most people are familiar with the whales and the puffins and the icebergs. Those are the icons of Newfoundland tourism. But the plants and animals that are on the bottom of the food chain that allow everything to live, we very rarely see. If it wasn't for the plankton, there wouldn't be any life in the ocean, and probably not much life on the land, because the plants, the phytoplankton, provide the globe with somewhere around 50 to 60% of its oxygen as they photosynthesize. And now, and pour a sample in here. You can see that every little brown dot there is a living animal. It's one of a species of zooplankton. So what we'll do is take this and have a look at it under the microscope and see them up close and personal. This park, in a way, is a very subtle park. It's the beauty is there and the life is there, but you have to look for it. It's not like some of the other parks that are perhaps more obvious. This park tends to be quieter and more subtle, and here's a great example of it.
It's just another example that things are not what they seem here. What looked like a threat to the cod is in fact a protector. What looked like a benign visitor was actually a threat. And what looked like a destroyer actually renews a forest. It's all part of the beautiful enigma that is Terra Nova National Park.